Welcome back to another deep dive. Today, we're doing something a little different. We aren't just looking at a concept. We are stepping right into your daily reality.
I think this is going to hit home for a lot of our listeners.
I really think so.
Yeah.
So I want you to picture the scene. You know it well. You're standing in the hospital hallway, maybe hovering near the nurse's station, trying to stay out of the way, but also, trying to learn something.
The classic clinical rotation experience. We've all been there.
Exactly. And you look around and you see these distinct groups moving past you. You've got the doctors, usually moving in a pack, maybe wearing those crisp white coats, stethoscopes draped just so.
Looking incredibly focused, maybe a little hurried.
Right. And then you see the nurses. They're in scrubs, they're moving fast, they're juggling charts and meds and family members.
It's the visual landscape of healthcare, isn't it? It's almost like observing different species in an ecosystem.
That is the perfect way to put it. An ecosystem.
Right.
And if you are a nursing student, and I know a huge chunk of our listeners today are tuning in from, like, the break room or on their commute to clinicals, you probably feel like you're an anthropologist trying to figure out the rules of these tribes.
That's a great word for it. Tribes.
Because they are different. They don't just dress differently, they speak differently, they prioritize different things.
They really, really do. And I think the natural assumption is that this is just a personality thing. You hear the stereotypes. Doctors are analytical and cold, and nurses are warm and fuzzy.
Right, that's what everyone says.
But what we are going to explore today is that this isn't accidental, and it's not about personality types at all. These are distinct cocultures.
Cocultures. I like that term. Tell me more about that.
Well, it's important. It means they're operating within the same larger culture, the hospital, but they have their own different histories, their own different values, different languages, and this is the key for our deep dive today. Completely different pedagogies.
Pedagogy. Okay, let's pause on that word for a second. It's one of those academic terms. It just means how we teach people, right?
Precisely. It's the method and the practice of teaching. And the central thesis of the source material we're covering today, it's chapter 2 of a text on health communication and pedagogy, is that how you are trained fundamentally determines how you think and ultimately how you communicate with the patient.
So the mission for this deep dive is to basically decode that secret history behind your clinical rotations. We're going to try and answer the big questions.
The why.
The why, yeah. How did history shape the way nurses communicate versus how doctors communicate? Why does one group tend to ask, where does it hurt? And the other group asks, how are you feeling?
And the answer, it really takes us on a bit of a time travel adventure. We have to go back over 100 years. We're going to look at what was basically the Wild West of medical education.
The Wild West, I like that.
And then we'll look at a bombshell report from 1910 called the Flexner Report. And that moment, that's when the road really split into two very different models. The biomedical model for medicine and the biopsychosocial model for nursing.
So, if you have ever stood in a patient's room and felt that little bit of friction, between what the doctor is saying and what you as a nurse or a nursing student want to say, this deep dive is for you.
It really is. We are going to validate that feeling and explain exactly where it comes from. It's going to make a lot of those awkward interactions make a lot more sense.
Okay, so let's get into it. We're diving into this text on health communication and pedagogy. And the first thing that just jumped off the page for me was the description of healthcare education in the United States before 1910.
It's kind of hard to believe, isn't it?
The source paints a picture that is, well, frankly, it's terrifying.
It really is. I mean, we take for granted today that if you go to a hospital, the people treating you have degrees, they have licenses, they've passed standardized boards. But pre-1910, all bets were off.
It was the era of the apprenticeship. Now, when I hear the word apprentice, I think of something pretty structured. Like a trade union where you have a master craftsman teaching you the ropes in a very specific way.
And that's the ideal version, sure. But in the 18th and 19th centuries, specifically in medicine and nursing, an apprentice just meant you were learning a trade from someone without any formal requirement for, classroom training.
No lectures, no exams, no standardized textbooks.
Very, very little. It was completely disjointed. You basically found a doctor, you followed them around, and you did what they did. And this is what leads to what the text calls the mentor trap.
The mentor trap. That sounds ominous.
It is. I mean, just think about it for a second. A new doctor or a new nurse was only as educated as the mentor they happened to be following.
Okay, so if your mentor was brilliant and up to date on the latest science,
you were in luck. Great. But if your mentor was operating on superstition or just flat out wrong and outdated practices.
Then you were learning superstition. You were learning to be wrong.
Exactly. Misinformation, mistakes, and fundamental misperceptions were passed down largely unchecked. It was a closed loop. If your mentor didn't believe in washing hands, you didn't wash your hands.
And then you would go on to teach your apprentice not to wash their hands.
That's the trap. It's a generational passing down of bad information.
That is such a scary thought. It's like a game of telephone, but with people's lives at stake.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just the mentorships, the schools that did exist. I mean, they were often just disasters. The source notes that there were absolutely zero standards for opening a medical school.
A total free-for-all.
Completely. Anyone, and I mean anyone, could open a medical school. It was described as a commercial enterprise, a business.
Not an educational institution.
Not primarily, no. Some had labs, most didn't. Some used textbooks, some didn't. And practically none of the textbooks that were used were peer-reviewed in any modern sense.
So wait, in, say, 1905, I could just rent a room downtown, put up a sign that says medical school, and start handing out degrees to anyone who pays me.
If you had the tuition fee, yes. The source says degrees were handed out like participation trophies. The goal was profit, pure and simple, not public safety.
Now, for the nursing students listening, you might be thinking, well, thank goodness that's over. We have the NCLEX, we have accreditation boards, we have the AACN.
And we do. The regulatory environment is completely different now, thank goodness. And this is a really important nuance the text brings up. The concept of the apprenticeship hasn't actually gone away.
It's just evolved.
It's evolved. It's been regulated.
Right, because we still do clinicals. That's the core of our training.
Exactly. Think about your rotations. And for doctors, think about residencies and fellowships. Those are just modern, highly regulated forms of apprenticeship. You are still learning by watching and doing under the supervision of a senior practitioner.
Which brings the mentor trap right back into play, doesn't it? Just in a different way.
It does. It absolutely does. Even today, if you have a preceptor who is burned out or cynical or maybe just uses outdated communication styles, that has an impact on you. You mimic what you see.
That is so true.
Yeah.
You pick up their habits, good and bad.
The difference is today we have the theoretical classroom back in to fact check what we see in the field. Back then, they didn't have that. They had nothing to compare it to.
So the classroom is our safety net against the bad habits of the field.
Precisely. It provides the standard, the evidence-based practice against which we measure what we see happening at the bedside.
Okay, so the system is broken. It's 1900. Healthcare is a mess. The public is, I imagine, getting pretty suspicious. And then this man enters the scene who is about to just blow the whole thing up. Abraham Flexner.
The Flexner Report of 1910. In the history of American medicine, this is probably the single most important document ever published. It changed everything.
The source describes it as a bombshell. So set the scene for us. Who was Flexner and what was he doing?
So Abraham Flexner wasn't a doctor, he was an educator, and the Carnegie Foundation commissioned him to do a comprehensive 5-year study of all American professional schools. He traveled all over the country, visited 155 medical schools in the U.S. and Canada, and he took notes.
And he did not hold back.
He was not there to make friends, no. He released his findings, and they were just devastating. He detailed what he called the frightening realities of medical education.
What were some of the big ones? What did he find?
Well, first and foremost, the overproduction of ill-trained practitioners. He basically said, we have too many doctors, and most of them are dangerous. He called it an absolute disregard of the public welfare.
Ouch. I can't imagine how that went over.
And he went after the commercialism. He just savaged the fact that these schools were run for profit. He pointed out that they were using what he called didactic methods, which is just a fancy word for lecturing, almost exclusive.
Now, why just lecturing? What was the problem with that?
Well, because it's cheap. Building a chemistry lab costs a lot of money. Buying microscopes costs money. Hiring real scientists to teach costs money.
But standing in front of a room of 100 students and just talking at them
is very, very cheap. So to maximize their profit, they cut out the actual science, the hands-on learning.
That is infuriating. It really is. But there was one specific argument the schools used to defend themselves that really caught my attention in the text. The poor boy argument.
Oh, this is a fascinating and really revealing piece of history.
It sounds so noble on the surface, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The schools argued that if they raised standards and required expensive labs, they would have to raise tuition.
Right.
And if they raised tuition, the poor boy, the student from a lower socioeconomic background, wouldn't be able to afford to become a doctor. They were blocking access.
Exactly. They framed their lack of standards as a way to ensure accessibility. Like they were champions of the common man. We're doing this for the poor boy.
But Flexner saw right through that.
He absolutely tore it apart. His rebuttal was just brutal and brilliant. He said this argument was completely insincere. He basically said, and this is a near quote, "A poor boy has no right to enter a profession he is unprepared for."
Wow, that's blunt.
It is. But his logic was sound. He argued that you aren't doing the poor boy any favors by letting him become a dangerous doctor, and you certainly aren't doing the public any favors.
So the argument wasn't really about the student at all.
No, he said it was actually just a shield to keep poor medical schools in business. It was about protecting the school's bank account.
That is a mic drop moment from 1910. So Flexner burns the whole house down. What was his blueprint for rebuilding it? What did he recommend?
He prescribed legitimacy through science. That was the core of it. He demanded that medical education move into the laboratory, that it be grounded in biology, chemistry, physics.
And he also said schools needed to be integrated with hospitals, right?
Yes, that was huge. He demanded that medical schools, which were often part of universities, needed to have direct control over hospital wards for teaching purposes.
The goal was to completely change the identity of the doctor.
Exactly, to convince the American public that doctors weren't just tradesmen with some potions and leeches, but that they were clinical scientists.
And this, right here, this is the fork in the road. This is the origin story of the divide we still see every day in the hospital. Medicine took Flexner's advice and just ran with it, creating what we now call the biomedical model.
They pivoted hard towards science to gain that credibility. They needed to look, act, and sound like experts.
Let's talk about the artifacts of this shift, because this is something you see all the time. The source mentions the white coat.
Yes. This is so interesting. Before this period, doctors often wore black. It was sort of somber, serious, almost like an undertaker's uniform.
Which doesn't inspire a lot of confidence, I'd imagine.
Probably not, but post-Flexner, they adopted the white lab coat.
And why white?
It's the color of the lab. It represents purity, sterility, science. It was a visual signal. It was a uniform.
And they even created a hierarchy with it.
They did. Short coats for students, long coats for the attending physicians, the experts. It visually elevated the physician from just an everyman to a distinct, high-status expert.
So the visual, the uniform, it matched the philosophy. And that philosophy is what we call the biomedical model. How does the text define this?
At its core, it's disease-centric. The primary focus is on identifying and treating the illness or the injury. The mindset is find it, fix it.
Find it, fix it. I like that. It's punchy and easy to remember.
It's very mechanical. And that's not an insult, it's descriptive. In the biomedical model, the body is viewed metaphorically as a machine.
Let's unpack that metaphor, because I think it's really central to how doctors are taught even today.
Okay, so if the body is a machine, then the heart is a pump. The kidneys are filters. The brain is the control panel, the central computer. The nervous system is all the wiring.
And if the pump is broken,
you fix the pump. You diagnose the problem with the pump. You don't ask the pump how it's feeling about its childhood or if it's stressed at work. You repair the valve or you bypass the blockage.
And the pedagogy, the way we teach it, follows this metaphor directly.
100%. Medical students spend years, their first 2 years especially, learning anatomy, which is the parts, physiology, how the parts work, and then pathology, what breaks the parts.
So the whole focus is on finding the broken piece.
The emphasis is on etiology, the cause of the disease, and then using pharmacology, which is drugs, or surgery, which is mechanical repair, to fix it.
It sounds incredibly logical, and honestly, I want to be really clear here. We aren't bashing this model.
Not at all.
If I have a blocked artery, I want a mechanic. I want someone who views my heart as a pump and knows exactly how to unclog it.
Absolutely. The source is very clear that this model is crucial. We need scientific competence, we need surgery, we need antibiotics. It has saved countless lives. But this intense focus had a side effect.
Which was?
As the focus narrowed to the tiny biological parts, technology exploded to study those parts. And that led to what we might call the specialist spiral.
The specialist spiral. This explains so much about the hierarchy you see in hospitals today.
It's something every nursing student sees in their clinicals. There is this cultural perception that special doctors, cardiologists, neurosurgeons, gastroenterologists have higher status than, say, a family doctor or a general practitioner.
Which is so strange when you really think about it, because the general practitioner have to know a little bit about everything. They're the jack of all trades. They have to be so broadly knowledgeable.
They do. But in this post-Flexner biomedical world, the deeper you go into one specific biological niche, the more expert you are perceived to be. And importantly, the more you are paid.
The source also mentions the cost implications of this.
Oh, the implications are huge. This specialization drives the development of new, expensive technology, and that leads to higher costs across the board. It's not just the direct cost of the MRI machine itself, it's the room for the machine, the technician to run the machine, the electricity, the specialized maintenance.
It all adds up.
It adds up very, very quickly.
And communication-wise, this creates a very specific dynamic. What happens to your communication style when you view yourself as a specialist mechanic?
It tends to become paternalistic. It's the expert model. I am the expert, I have the specialized knowledge, I will fix you. It also narrows the focus of the conversation.
How so?
Well, if I'm a cardiologist, I'm looking at your heart. I'm asking questions about your heart. I might not be looking at your home life or your anxiety or your diet, except in the ways that they strictly mechanically affect the heart muscle.
Everything else is just noise.
It can be seen as noise, yes. Irrelevant data.
Okay, so that's the biomedical model. High tech, high science, body as machine, provider-centric. Now let's look at the other side of the hallway. Let's talk about the nursing coculture.
Right. So, nursing also professionalized after Flexner. It wasn't immediate, but the push for legitimacy was there. We moved from hospital-based diploma training to associate and bachelor degrees in universities. We developed our own body of science.
But, and this is the key, nursing adopted a different underlying philosophy.
A very different philosophy, the biopsychosocial model.
Which is a bit of a mouthful.
Oh!
Biopsychosocial. Let's break that down piece by piece.
It's what I like to call the nursing superpower. While medicine, following Flexner, was drilling down deeper and deeper into the cell and the organ, nursing pedagogy expanded to look at the context surrounding the person.
So the bio part is first.
That's the biological. That's the shared ground. Nurses still need to understand the pathophysiology. You absolutely cannot be a good nurse without the science. You have to know why the meds work, what the side effects are, what the lab values mean.
Right. You aren't just there to hold hands. You're actively monitoring complex biological systems.
Exactly. But then nurses add the psychological, the emotional state of the patient. Is this person anxious? Are they depressed? Are they confused or scared? How is this illness affecting their mental health?
And then the third piece, social.
The social environment. What is their family situation like? Do they have a support system? Can they afford their medications? Do they have stairs in their house and they just had hip surgery?
All the context.
All the context that the human being lives in. So instead of find it, fix it, what's the nursing motto?
It shifts. It becomes, tell me how you are feeling.
Yes. It acknowledges that health is complex and multifocal. You aren't just a broken pump in a bed. You are a person with a broken pump who is also terrified of the upcoming surgery, who maybe lives alone, and who is worried they can't afford the prescription when they get discharged.
That distinction is just, it's huge. And the source mentioned something really interesting about career flexibility that comes from this. Because the nursing model is focused on the patient rather than the body part, it changes how nurses can move through their careers.
Yes, this is such a great point for all the students listening. Doctors, because of that intense specialization, are often locked into their specialties.
Right. If you do a 3 to 6 year residency in neurosurgery, you are a neurosurgeon.
You're a neurosurgeon. You don't just decide on a Tuesday that you want to be a pediatrician now. That would require years and years of complete retraining.
You're too specialized. You're the expert on the brain, not necessarily the whole developing child.
Correct. But nurses can move. You can work in labor and delivery and then decide you want to change and go to the ER. From the ER, you can go to oncology. From oncology to psych.
And why is that possible?
Because the core skill of nursing, that biopsychosocial assessment, is portable. The patient is the constant. The specific anatomy or disease might change. You might need to learn new meds or new protocols. But that holistic approach to the human being, that remains the same no matter where you are.
I love that. It really validates that the so-called soft skills of nursing are actually the core, transferable, expert skills of the profession.
They aren't soft skills, they are clinical skills. That is the fundamental takeaway. Communication is a clinical skill.
Okay, so we have these two models, biomedical and biopsychosocial. And now we get to the part that affects every single interaction on the hospital floor, communication. The Force describes this as the detective versus the storyteller.
This is such a helpful way to visualize it. It really clarifies the two approaches. Let's look at the biomedical communication style first. The physician as detective.
Okay, detective. Picture Sherlock Holmes. What is their primary goal in the conversation?
Data extraction. They need to solve the case. They need to identify the problem, the pathology, so they can apply the fix. They are looking for clues that fit the diagnostic puzzle.
And what's their main tool for doing that?
They use closed-ended questions. The technical term for this is convergent inquiry. The questions are designed to converge on a single answer.
Give us some examples.
Do you have a fever? Is the pain sharp or dull? Is there blood in the sputum? On a scale of 1 to 10, what is your pain? How long has this been hurting?
I can hear it in my head. It's rapid fire. It's very efficient.
It is. It's designed for efficiency. They are looking for specific data points, a yes, a no, or a number. 102.4 degrees, 7 out of 10. The dynamic here is that the provider controls the interaction.
And they discourage drifting.
Absolutely. If the patient starts to drift, well, I first felt the pain when I was at my daughter's house, and I was worried because her cat is sick. The biomedical communicator gently but firmly cuts that off.
Why? Why cut that off?
Because it's seen as irrelevant data to the machine's function. The cat being sick doesn't explain the fever. It's noise in the signal. It's inefficient.
Right. Just the facts, ma'am. Now, let's contrast that with the nurse as storyteller.
The biopsychosocial communication style. The goal here isn't just data extraction, it's narrative building and relationship development.
So instead of closed-ended questions, you use open-ended questions.
Divergent inquiry.
Exactly. The questions are designed to open up the conversation, to diverge. Tell me how you're doing. What's going on with you today? You seem a little anxious. Can you tell me about that?
And that invites the patient to tell their health story, to give you the context.
It completely equalizes the power dynamic. It builds trust. And here is the absolutely crucial thing for the students listening. This isn't just about being nice. This is a scientific process of data gathering. Say more about that, because I think sometimes students feel like the chatting part is secondary to the real work of passing meds or doing a dressing change.
The chatting is the real work. It is assessment. By letting the patient tell their story, you gather data that the closed-ended questions will always miss. For example, let's take a patient with high blood pressure who isn't taking their prescribed medication.
Okay, a common problem.
A very common problem. The biomedical detective sees non-compliant patient in the chart. They check the box. Maybe they come in and give a short lecture. You need to take this medication. It's very important.
Right. Do you understand? Yes. End of conversation.
But the biopsychosocial storyteller sits down and asks, I see you haven't been taking your blood pressure pills. Can you tell me what's stopping you?
An open-ended question.
And the patient might say, well, they make me really dizzy and I drive a forklift for a living. If I get dizzy at work, I'll get fired. And if I lose my job, I lose my health insurance.
Boom. That is critical data.
Yeah. It's the most important piece of data in that entire case. It's the root cause of the noncompliance. But you only get that data through the biopsychosocial approach. The biomedical approach might just see the symptom, the noncompliance. The biopsychosocial approach sees the system the person is living in.
That is a massive, massive distinction.
Yeah.
But let's be real. These differences can and do cause friction. We've all seen it in clinicals. The doctor wants to get in, get the vitals, make a decision, and get out. The nurse wants to sit down and discuss the patient's home situation.
The source calls these intercultural issues within healthcare, and it's a real problem because the system, the hospital system itself, is still largely designed around the biomedical model. It is provider-centric and efficiency-focused.
Efficiency is the key word there, isn't it? Open-ended questions take time. Listening to a story takes time.
It does, and in a busy, understaffed hospital, time is money. But the risk, and the source is very clear on this, is that without that biopsychosocial element, you get low compliance and a deep lack of trust. The patient feels like a broken car on an assembly line.
And broken cars don't heal themselves. People do.
Exactly. So if the patient feels unheard, if they feel like just a number or a disease, they don't follow the plan, they don't trust the provider, they end up back in the hospital a month later, and that costs the system even more money in the long run.
So the inefficient 5-minute conversation is actually the most efficient, most cost-effective intervention in the long term.
Without a doubt.
So what's the solution? We can't just get rid of the biomedical model. We need the science. We absolutely need the surgery.
No, of course not. We don't want to get rid of it. The goal is integration. The source emphasizes that effective 21st century healthcare needs both models working together. We are moving toward a team-based, interdisciplinary model of care.
Which brings us to the big so what for our listener. You're a nursing student, you are studying for exams, you're stressed about clinicals, you're trying to learn a million drugs. Why does knowing about the Flexner Report from 1910 help you today?
because it validates your curriculum. When you are sitting in class and your professor is talking about holistic care or therapeutic communication, and you're in the back of your mind thinking, this is fluff, just teach me how to start an IV, remember this discussion.
You aren't being taught that stuff just to fill time or check a box.
No, you are being taught to look at the whole person because that is the unique heritage, the distinct science, and the incredible value of the nursing profession. You are not being trained to be a mini doctor or a doctor's assistant. You are practicing a different, equally valid, and absolutely necessary form of healthcare.
It's not that one is wrong and the other is right. It's that they are different tools for different jobs.
Think of it this way. The doctor brings the microscope to the bedside. They zoom in tight on the pathology, on the cell, on the organ. The nurse brings the wide-angle lens. They see the patient in the context of their family, their home, their life.
And you need both to get the full picture.
You cannot have effective healthcare without both the microscope and the wide-angle lens.
I love that analogy. That's something I'll definitely remember. So as we wrap up, there's a provocative thought the source leaves us with, and this is something for you to chew on during your next shift.
It's a great question for the modern era. We accept that the specialist is the expert. Like you'd hire a contractor or a lawyer because of their expertise. But in 2026, who should really be making the final decisions about care?
The source poses this question. If the doctor is the expert mechanic, shouldn't they just make the call? They know best, right?
Right. But the body isn't a car you drop off at the shop. It belongs to the client, the patient. So even with all that incredible expertise, the goal shouldn't be paternalism. It should be collaboration.
So we need to move the entire system culturally from communication as a tool for scientific discovery, that detective mode, to communication as an opportunity for relationship building.
Because ultimately, the patient is the one who has to live with the decision. If the mechanic fixes your car, the car doesn't have to agree with the repair. It's passive. But a patient has to actively agree to the treatment plan. They have to participate.
That is such a powerful and important shift in perspective.
It really is. And it puts the nurse in the perfect position to be the facilitator of that collaboration, to be the bridge between the two models.
This has been such a great unpacking of why things are the way they are. I feel like I understand the hospital dynamic, the culture of it all, so much better now.
It gives you a map to the territory, doesn't it?
It really does. So to all the nursing students listening, next time you put on those scrubs, remember, you are wearing an artifact of a specific and important culture. You are part of a lineage that fought to keep the human being at the center of the scientific process.
And please remember, asking, how does that make you feel, is just as scientifically valid and often more important than asking, where does it hurt?
That's it for this deep dive. Good luck in clinicals, everyone. Go be the wide-angle lens the system desperately needs. We'll see you next time.